All right, everybody, we have a special treat today. Um, we've, you know, had the opportunity to have some guests on in the past, some guests that have participated in different sports, have done some different things throughout their athletic careers, as well as maybe in their professional careers as well. Today, we've got the special treat about a sport that admittedly Jim and I did not know anything about until it kind of popped into our timeline one day. And we're like, hey, maybe this could be something we could chat about. So, joining us today to talk about Major League Quidditch is Juan Martinez, who is the coach of the Austin Outlaws. A little bit about Juan: he played 6 years, has won the last three national tournaments, and previously managed a couple other teams within the Major League Quidditch. So, welcome, Juan. Thanks for joining us today, and glad you could be on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's first time I get to be on a podcast actually talking about the sport, so it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, well, we're glad to be able to offer that opportunity, and maybe we can do this again later on. But just to kind of get into this, we'll get into the sport a little bit of itself, I think, or kind of through this conversation. But for you, how did you get into this sport? What got you interested, and did you kind of hear this from a friend? Did it kind of just one of those things you're like, hey, this is going on, I wanted to give it a shot? So for you, how did you get involved in Quidditch?
Yeah, my story is actually a little bit weird. I'm an older player. I'm 34 years old, so I'm like at the high end of the age range.
Hmm.
But if I explain what Quidditch is to you, it's a pretty weird sounding sport. But if you live in Austin, you know, like our slogan is that we're a weird city. And so I was actually playing a much weirder sport, and I found it on Meetup, and I was actually trying to recruit somebody that I ran into at that. It was called Field Mojo. I saw this really athletic woman, and I was like, you know what? I actually play soccer on the weekends too, so I'm gonna go see if I can recruit her. And she just kind of, I walked up and I was like, hey, do you want to play soccer? And she like looked me up and down and like shook her head, and she was like, do you want to play Quidditch instead? And I was like, well, that's why not? So it was just the most random of chances that I just happened upon this group of people who were starting up a Quidditch team. Um, and so yeah, I just kind of stuck with it. And I'm exactly the kind of person that you want who's just gonna like show up and then at some point become obsessed with it. And so now I like manage and coach and like run all these extra things that just take up way too much time. I do podcast interviews about it. So but yeah, I'm a little bit too old to play it, but that's why I'm third string, fourth string kind of guy. But I'm just as happy to be on the team as it is to do anything else in my life. So
So, with the sport, it derived from Harry Potter, if I'm right?
yeah, it's straight out the book. You know, we're starting in like season 15, season 16. I'm gonna get in trouble for not knowing that, but
Yeah.
we're like 16 years old at this point. If you look at it sort of broken out into like thirds, the first 5 or 6 years was pretty closely related to what you think of a Harry Potter sport. There were capes and the brooms with the bristles and lots of whimsy, as we like to call it in our community. The snitch, if you know the story of how that actual ball is played in the real game, it had a whole lot of folklore around it and just rules that don't make any sense in today's modern sports world. But the next 5 years was this like uprising of sort of the collegiate athletes. And so there's like a 3 to 4 year window where all those athletes sort of graduated and wanted to continue playing. And then you see the rise of like the community teams. And that's kind of been the last 5 years.
Okay.
It's
So,
cool.
would you go ahead, Muff?
I'm going to interject here. So I remember, there was a time, I work in higher education, so I work at a college, and Jim and I worked together at one point at the same college. And I remember there being a discussion where there was a student that like transferred from, and I forget where the student transferred from, a different school, and they came in, and I remember them talking about wanting to like start like a Quidditch club, and me being like, wait, what? And I was never big into Harry Potter, but I knew what the Quidditch part was.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wait, I need this explained to me. Like, how does this work? Because, and I got a little bit of explanation, but that was like my first exposure to this happening. And I was baffled because I was like, wait, this is real. And they're like, yeah, there's, and, being from this area, West Virginia, Pennsylvania area, this was not something that was happening around here. So it was like, there was people who were like, oh, what do you mean that we're not doing that? That's dumb or that's stupid. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
I'm just interested now is where I was. So it's pretty cool how things kind of just grow like that.
Yeah, it had a period where there were, I don't know the numbers now, but we had this massive explosion of just college teams popping up all over the country. And we've sort of seen that shrink over the last few years, which is the concern we have as people who are trying to get the sport going. But just pitching people on it, like it's hard to get people to come out for a lot of these colleges, getting that recruitment going. It's sort of been, it's hit or miss, but the pandemic's kind of helped or hurt just depending on your regional, like the students in that area. But since so many people don't have anything to do right now, they're just sort of looking for that interaction with other college kids. So some teams are seeing more enrollment, some or involvement, and some aren't. But trying to pitch people to play Quidditch is a really hard thing to do, because it's just explaining it's weird, and running with a stick between your legs is always weird. You get really used to it really quickly, but right off the bat, if I just tell you like hold the stick and run across that field, like it's not an easy thing to sell.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. But it seems to me very fun once you get it down. Like once you understand the rules. So can you dive into the rules a little bit for our listeners?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to have something in your head to start with, if you think of a game of dodgeball happening on the field at the same time, a game of like a mix between soccer and basketball or hockey, they kind of have like similar rule sets or like philosophies. But those are sort of two games that are happening on the same field at the same time. And so you think of this as like we have a quaffle game, which consists of chasers and keepers. But basically, the quaffle, if you look in the Harry Potter lore, it's like this ball with like indentations in it, and we can't really make balls like that, so we just use a volleyball that's been deflated. And so they can only really interact with that. And then you have beaters on the field, which in the old Harry Potter stories was like living balls that would try to just destroy people. And obviously we can't do that, so we just turned it into a game of dodgeball. And now these beaters have the ability to basically hold these dodgeballs and try to knock off everyone else in the field from their brooms. And if you get hit with the beater or you get hit with that ball, you have to take your broom out from between your legs, run back to your hoops, tag in, and then you're back in play. But the traditional iconography of having 3 hoops on the field, you're just trying to get that volleyball through those hoops. And that's where I say like you have this idea of sort of basketball or soccer. Like you have a lot of strategy that goes into your positioning on the field, the passes, how you play defense. There's tackling in the game. So you're throwing alley-oops, somebody's flying through the air trying to catch it and dunk it while 2 people are covering a hoop. So there's that basketball soccer kind of concept. It's interesting because like if you have hockey, you can go behind the net. You can't do that like in soccer. So it adds this like I spent years playing soccer, and my philosophy was always like taken to the sideline and they run out of room eventually. Well, that's not really the case here. Like they'll just keep going around. So you're just like chasing people for miles, it feels like. But that whole quaffle game is happening on the field. And then at the same time, the position that I actually play is a beater. And so when you have that dodgeball in your hand and you have 2 beaters on each team and there's only 3 balls. And so there's this built-in imbalance to the game where if you have 2 balls and the other team only has 1, you have bludger control and you have just so much more ability to dictate what everyone on the field is doing. If you think of this beater position as, I like to tell new players, it's the most powerful position that I've ever seen in any sport because they have the ability to take anybody off their broom, just take them out of the game. Nobody tries to score if you're in the way. They don't even try. Unless you're like a new kid and you just think that you're Superman and then you just drive in on whoever you want. But it's just so much power built into this one position, and it's got a built-in imbalance. So there's so much strategy that goes into that. And I could just we do film reviews, we do podcasts, we do discussions on Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. So like you can put a lot of time into that. But that's sort of the general rule. The high level, I spent too much time on some of that, but that's a general rule set.
And then as far as the season, from what we could see, runs from June 1st to August 30th for Major League Quidditch.
Yes. So the season has sort of the regular season, and then we have a championship tournament. So Major League Quidditch it fills this gap of the normal college season, which is actually a separate league called U.S. Quidditch. and that
Okay.
one runs from basically September, August, all the way to April. But it's crazy how regional variances you'll get through that, because like the North and the Northeast, they don't want to play in the snow basically,
Right.
and so they kind of shut down in that winter season, where down here in Texas it's 105 degrees all year round, so we'll play 3 hours every weekend. College teams put a lot of time and effort into it, so um, just depending on where you're at, that season can look wildly different.
All right. Well,
I left
do
out
the
one part,
go ahead.
so I want to add that. I said there was two games happening at the same time. That happens for the first 20 minutes of a game.
Yeah, that was like the next thing I was
Yeah.
going to do. I was like, there's this thing.
Yeah.
I was like, and this was the most interesting thing, and I think is probably
Yeah.
what people would relate to in this game, like because that's what that's where you get like traction with like social media is this part of it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's this position. I mean, in the books, the snitch, it was a golden snitch, and it would fly around the field, and Harry Potter's position seeker had to go and get it. And they pretty much released that right at the beginning of the game. It's so hard to catch. So like they'd play an entire game, and it was worth a ton of points. And it's a broken system. And if you read the actual rules of the game doesn't make any sense. But in our world, we pretty much put it at 20 minutes. We call a timeout, and then the snitch comes out, and it's a person. And this is the part that sounds silly. He's got a little sock on his butt with a ball in it. You got to go get that ball, and that's hard because these people can be 6'5" with arms miles long, and they're wrestlers or they're speedy people, and you just can't catch them. And so you're basically doing a wrestling match while those other two games are going on. That's still happening. You have this third game that starts, and it's just a wrestling match out there, and you're throwing people, you're flipping them, you're yanking their broom out. We got a guy in our sport who, you better have a whole extra supply of brooms, because he'll snap them in half, because those people don't want to let go, and he's not going to let you close. So he's ripping your broom out, snapping them, pieces are flying everywhere. He's throwing you down on the ground. And once that happens, all eyes look to that. Like two other games are still happening. Everyone on the sideline is looking at that snitch. It's a wild sport.
So do I have to stay on my broom at all times?
Yeah. Yep.
If I'm
But if I stay on the broom, Jim, you have to have it between your legs. Like,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
okay.
I got it.
Okay.
If I have a hold of the snitch and I'm wrestling for the snitch, can I get hit with the dodgeball?
Yep.
And I have to give up fighting for the snitch.
Yep. But
Ooh.
that's where the strategy, like the people trying to hit you with the ball are having to fight. If I'm the beater and I'm trying to hit you, I have to face another beater who doesn't want me to. And so there's this coordination. There's so much coordination. We have like special calls for it, where it's like sometimes you want to get hit, because if I have to throw that ball at you, that means I might lose control of that. And so there's a whole lot of strategies that can go into that. But yeah, you kind of sit back and wait until you think you've got an opportunity to go, and your beaters will clear a path for you, and then you just send it. You just go.
How many players are on a Quidditch team?
So our game day roster is about 21 people. Most teams can push it to that number. But I've played with as little as 11 people on a team, and you have six. I got to count them out. 6 people on the field until that seeker comes out. You got a 7th. So a third of your team is on the field at any given time, and you're sprinting. It's a lot of speed.
Yeah, I've watched like a couple videos when I was looking at this, and I was like, this is not a sport for somebody that is not in shape and able to just run, because it was running the entire time. It's like soccer on steroids is how I was looking at it, because there's no like downtime, and it didn't look like the field was large enough, and there's not enough people on the field at one time where it's like you can loaf off to the side. Like it's constant action.
It's interesting because like the college game is very much a sprint, like one end to the other. As soon as you get a ball, you're pretty much taking off, and you're spinning, and people are trying to tackle you. As you get a little older, you realize like maybe I don't have to do that. Like maybe I can slow down a little bit. So like the community or the club scene is a little bit slower. The team I played for has actually kind of been criticized a little bit for playing a little too slow, but we call it methodical. So it's all how you phrase it.
It is. It's all in the words.
Yeah. But
So
it's a load.
Yeah. For you, when you say you play slower, is this just you're all using more of the strategy to the game as opposed to just the pure physical prowess.
Yeah, well, we want the ability to say like this is where everything favors us. An action has happened or somebody's out of position where I can go at 100 and I can hit whoever I need to, but I'm putting every ounce of strength or speed I have into this moment, but I'm not doing it just to get tackled. Like I need an opening here. And so yeah, it is slower, but it's just smarter.
Now, the one thing that I didn't like initially when I was doing some reading, doing some research, and then I started watching some of these videos, I did not realize the tackling and everything was part of it. Like I did not expect that. And then I started watching it. I was like, wait, they're tackling. I didn't, that's not what I expected to see. Is that, because it's kind of got like a rugby feel to it in my mind. Like that's.
Yeah. So I've never played rugby, but the teams that I played on, we have this player, Casey Irwin, and she's hands down, everyone looks to her and says like she's the best tackler we've ever had in the sport. And like the challenge we've always had in Quidditch is a lot of people know how to tackle, a lot of people know how to hit. You throw a shoulder into them and you wrap up. In Quidditch, until very recently, it's always been a one-armed only tackle. So you have to wrap somebody up, and Casey's 5'8" or something, and she's a strong lady, but there's a lot of big guys here, and she'll bring them all down no problem because she's perfected the art of like wrap that one arm, fall, use everything, momentum, their weight against them, all of it. But I've never been able to successfully tackle anybody, so I don't know how she does it. But yeah, it's a tough thing to do with one arm. But that's the change that's happened in the last, well, I guess not last year because we didn't have a season, but the last 2 seasons we played, we'll have had two-arm tackling, which is a big point of discussion for us because we don't know, most of our players aren't previous footballers or anything like that, right? So you're asking a lot of newer players to this athletic scene to sort of just get ready to wrap people up and bring them to the ground. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
How often are there tackles within a game? Is it happening pretty consistently or okay? And
Yeah.
that's what I couldn't get a gauge for when I was like watching those. This like, is this constantly happening or is this just here and there people get tackled?
I'll say there's a tackle attempt on every play.
Okay.
But successful tackles where you bring them down, that's, I mean, I'm trying to think of like how many possessions you have, and I would say a good game probably has 20 possessions each team, and you probably see a tackle on 25% of those, like a successful to the ground tackle.
Yeah.
You see a lot of hits.
Okay, yeah. So just trying to knock people off without a tackle or an attempted tackle. Okay, cool.
How many injuries with the tackles and the broomsticks do you see?
I've only ever seen one injury from a broomstick. The tackles are a bigger deal than other things because you'd think the stick would be in the way for everything. Yeah. It's really not. I mean, I've had a stick between my legs for 6 years, which is a weird thing to say, but I've maybe been bothered by it once. I can't even remember it. So the sticks hardly have ever come into play. I've only seen one injury from it. And then for tackles, it's less the tackles and more just the hits because you have quite a disparity of like sizes. We have some freshman 18-year-old players who are playing alongside me and I'm 34, right? Like I don't really have a ton of business being on the same field as them. But yeah, I mean, we've laid some hits against people who are really smaller and some people don't know how to take the tackles. And, we do a lot of alley-oop lob passes where people are just full arms extended, ready to take that pass. But then you're just exposed. I mean, we've seen it in every sport, but the injuries I would say are more from hits than anything to do with the broom.
What is the broom made of? I mean, you said that sometimes it gets broken. Like,
oh yeah,
that's a thing.
Yeah. So it used to be like early on, it was literally whatever broom you could find. So they'd have like Swiffers and stuff out there.
Yeah.
They sort of standardized it to like wood brooms, and then everything about that. It was actually the bristles. I've heard when it was the wood brooms, the bristles were the things that were the most annoying. So they wiped all that out, and now we just use a 4-foot PVC pipe. So it's got some bend and some flex, and that's where that snap comes in. But yeah, they're pretty small, pretty light.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Jim,
Like, I'm sick of-
I see Jim's head's like,
Yeah.
I could see like the questions are about to come to him, and I'm like, all right, buddy, spit it out. I know you got a
uh,
bunch in there.
He's processing.
Yeah.
I'm still stuck on. So you're jumping up where the alley oop passes, and the stick has to stay there. So you're pitching that between your legs,
Hmm.
and the stick's just out there. Like, I can see people running into these sticks. I can see some people getting impaled, and you're telling me that doesn't happen.
I mean, I've practiced every Sunday before the pandemic for 6 years, for 5 years, played on multiple teams, multiple tournaments. I mean, a couple hundred games at this point, and I really don't think that the stick is a problem.
Okay. So you've won 3 national tournaments.
Yeah, technically. I'm on the team. I don't
You've
want to
been on
pitch
the
it as
team.
yeah.
Right, right.
I'm a contributor, but I'm not the reason we won tournaments.
Oh no, for this case you are. You're the reason.
Yeah. Sorry,
Right,
I won
right.
3.
Right. The national tournaments, the way it's broken down with divisions and the whole tournament structure, appear to be like a major affair. Like, they take up a whole month. Are they held in one place? Kind of explain how that breaks down for me.
So for Major League Quidditch, it's well for both conferences or leagues. Both leagues that we have, they're pretty much 2-day tournaments. And for U.S. Quidditch, it's not a whole month. It happens in April, and it's the thing that the entire country is building for. You know, I mentioned all those tournaments, all the games we play. We have this thing where, like, we want to win every tournament, we want to win every game, but if we lose them, it's not really a big deal to my team because everyone knows the only goal to win is the national championship. And so, yeah, all the college teams, that the big thing is being able to qualify to travel so you can play teams that you haven't played that season. And so you pretty much have, I forget the numbers. The numbers change every year, but there was a point in time where you'd have like 64 college teams and 24 community teams. And so you have hundreds of people playing, and we had it here in Austin for 2 years and covered like 9 soccer fields.
Wow.
Just game after game after game. It's a huge community volunteer coordination effort. So yeah, it's a wild thing, but it only takes about 2 days, but it goes to the limit. Like, they're ready to shut the lights off on us.
I mean, that's what it seems like. It's a huge deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only sellable point we have for a lot of these college teams, because in some of the places, like Tennessee's got a college team, but there's like 3 of them. So it's hard to keep a lot of kids interested in that when you play the same teams multiple times.
Sure.
You want to play Boise, or UCLA comes out and you're like, hell yeah, I get to play a cool college team. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I never would have, known half the colleges existed if it wasn't for Quidditch. So it's a really cool experience.
So with the pandemic, everything kind of stops.
Yeah, it destroyed the 2020 Nationals, got wiped out because it happened right before that started, and then it's carried through this one. We're not going to have one for this year, so it cost us 2 championship. Or sorry, I said that like we were going to win them. It cost us 2 tournaments.
You were going to win them.
Yeah. But you had QuidCon 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to know more about QuidCon.
Yeah, so I wasn't a part of the original kinds of QuidCons they have. I think they had actual physical, like a convention where people came out and did a lot of stuff. But this was a virtual convention, and basically we just reached out to everybody in the community. People in the different leagues were putting together just panels. So we had workshops on how to be a better coach, how to be better. Each of these positions had workshops. I actually led a panel myself, which was basically just asking college kids what they thought of rule changes, because as a sport grows, you think of like any sport has the voices that are out there that you hear more than other people. I only read like 2 Cowboys websites, so I know those voices, that kind of thing, right? So we had that same thing in Quidditch. So my goal with that was to say, like, these college kids also have some thoughts. Let's hear what they have to say. So it's just, there was probably 20 or 30 different panels. I don't lose count because they had so many.
Wow. And so there was a lot of participation in QuidCon. Did it fill the void for the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who loves sports probably would love whatever sport they're into, but Quidditch people love their sport and they're just craving anything. I mean, Major League Quidditch also did a virtual video game tournament, just like trying to feel that competitive space.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, people are just itching for any content that's, not a repeat of what they've been seeing for the last year. So QuidCon was a really new and refreshing way to actually engage with them.
I'm not, obviously I don't play Quidditch, but just the advertising and what they seem to be offering for QuidCon had me like, yeah, this would, if they did this for any sport, this would be cool. So
Yeah.
it seemed like they put a lot of thought into filling the void of what the pandemic has caused. So I thought that was really neat. Good on the Quidditch community for doing that. I also want to talk about, this seems to be a very diverse and inclusive community in sport. It seems like it brings, no matter size, shape, background, it brings everybody together. And there are a lot of resources that Major League Soccer gives to its teams.
Major League Soccer, Jim?
Major League Quidditch. I'm thinking about... He said it was like soccer, and I can't get over it's not like soccer. It's way different than soccer. I'm still stuck on that. But it gives you a lot of resources as far as for teams to be inclusive. And can you talk about like the makeup of your teams, the makeup of all these teams, and how inviting it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the crux for a lot of players is, there's talks of toxic masculinity in a lot of the sports scene, and whether that's college or professional levels. In Quidditch, very early on, I mentioned Whimsy, like it had this space that didn't sort of subscribe to that atmosphere, and so there's been a lot of history of being really open to this diverse group of people, and they made it a point really early on to sort of solidify that in the philosophy of Quidditch. So gender inclusivity, a lot of racial discussions on race, the topics of race, sexism, all that. It's actually something we struggle with still. Like if you go onto our chat forums, like there's daily or weekly a pretty heavy conversation about that and how we're still lacking on a lot of that. Because I don't know how you actually heard about this, but like we recently made just like a single post on ESPN Sports Center. Like there was a really cool highlight and featured a lot of really exciting plays. But we had to all sort of step back and say, like, it was mostly a bunch of white dudes scoring dunks. And as cool as it looked, like, that doesn't truly represent our sport because we're filled with everyone. And so the resources that are out there, we had multiple panels during this QuidCon to actually discuss that. Like, it's a thing that I want to name drop Christian Barnes. He's been one of the most vocal and outspoken people, but there's a whole group of people who just are very outspoken and very brave to just always, it doesn't matter what topic we're actually on or what initiative we're trying to move forward with to make the sport better. They're very aware of how to make sure it stays inclusive. And so, you have a lot of transgender or people who identify as a gender outside the traditional binary. A lot of players with that sort of community are taking their space and like making sure that they're able to own that space in our sport. And that's just a very cool thing, that it's cool to see the leadership of these conferences, or I keep calling them conferences, these leagues, like actually going out and supporting and making sure that they are recognized and that they feel safe in these spaces. So that's kind of the cool thing for me about what makes Quidditch a little bit different than some of these other sports, because it's not drowning in that very macho masculine energy.
I would 100% agree. I would 100% agree. I think this gives an avenue for everyone. And while the rules and backstory are different, I think that makes it very unique. And the fact that it's inclusive of everyone, it just adds to that. It just makes it a place for everyone. And I dig that a lot. When I was doing the research and reading about Major League Quidditch, it was like, I like this a lot because it gives people an avenue to be with other people no matter where they come from. And I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I would always considered myself pretty open-minded, but I think exposure is a key to continuing that growth. and Quidditch has given me that as much as anything else. So I love the competitive spirit of it. And having that be such a big part of the sport itself is a very cool thing because, you know, I don't have anything back versus Cowboys, but I spend a ton of time on Cowboys and nothing like that ever comes up. Like football is not a space for that conversation. So it's very cool. I think one really good example of that is when I started Quidditch, just referred to this thing called the gender rule. Like we have 6 players on the field. And when I first started, it was the gender rule is that you have to have 2 women on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to like change how you think of that and change the language around it to say it's not that you have to have 2 women on the field. It's that you can't have more than 4 men, more than 4 of any gender. And that's this change to just the language of saying like treating it as if you say like you have to have 2 women is sort of like a handicap, like, oh, this is a negative thing. Where it's like, actually, no, like you have to change your perspective on it and say like the rule is about maximizing the number of any particular gender, not minimizing the impact of something.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of conversation is something that happens in our sport. And I think that's extremely cool.
Fantastic.
And I mean, like you said, the best tackler on your team was it Casey, I think the name was, and you're just, that was something that if Casey wasn't in the sport or didn't feel safe, like it was a safe space to be involved, like you may not ever know that. And that's just, I mean, it's really cool. And I think I saw, and I know the US Quidditch social media, I think is, especially on Instagram, I saw they're constantly highlighting different things. So like during Black History Month, it was almost daily. I saw stuff during Women's History Month, which is in March. Right now, I saw a lot of stuff and just a lot of inclusive discussions, language, and just education, which I think is fantastic to see. And I agree with Jim. This is really, really cool for me to see, especially somebody who works in like a collegiate environment where these discussions are happening all of the time on a college campus. So seeing that put into action in other ways is always cool for me to see.
My question, to kind of, do you think you've stepped out of the shadow of the Harry Potter lore and kind of cut your own path? Have you separated Quidditch from Harry Potter?
Well, that's the question that we fight over every week in our discussions. I mean, we struggle with it because as long as we have Quidditch as a name and we have brooms and we have the snitch out there, right? Like you're never going to break that association. And Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling has her own thing happening right now. Like there's controversy around her.
Right.
But like maybe the Harry Potter idea will sort of fall to the side and the sport will just have enough people that have played it in their past. Like we're only 16 years old. Frisbee's much older. You see, I don't know if they've reached a cap or something. I know they're always still growing, but everyone knows what Frisbee is, or Ultimate Frisbee specifically. And so like maybe we'll get to that point where enough people have played Quidditch and you've got enough podcasts that are doing interviews about it and ESPN's done enough highlights that you can break that association enough to where we can be just our own sport without that Harry Potter association. I don't think we're there yet, and I don't know when that can happen, but I guess the short answer is no, I don't think we're apart yet.
And in some ways, if another Harry Potter movie comes out and it highlights Quidditch in the movie, your recruitment kind of goes up, does it not?
We think so.
And so
we're so different now, yeah.
You don't necessarily want to go away from it because you kind of need the numbers to go up until you're fully established by yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that's the struggle, right? Like you drop Harry Potter and Quidditch and you have this easy inbuilt or inroad to a lot of people. So if what is it, Fantastic Beasts, something like that, if that franchise continues, like maybe you start this new generation of kids who are interested in Harry Potter, because that's how it started for us in the first place.
Right.
All those kids reading those books started going to college. Wouldn't it be crazy if we played the sport? Yeah. So we'll take it for sure because we're always willing to grow, but we're very different now. So if you saw Harry Potter in the film and then you came out to our field and you see me ready to hit you, like it's a different experience.
right. So how can we help the sport grow? What's it take to keep the sport growing aside from Harry Potter? How can we get it to grow in Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia?
So for me, the growth of the sport's really just dependent on people understanding that like there's physicality here. Major League Quidditch, I play in Austin. We've got teams, we've got 15 teams, mostly basically from the Rockies over. So Chicago, sorry, is it Detroit, Indianapolis? Those cities have Major League Quidditch teams. They're actually looking for their coaches in some of these cities, so they're ready to start ramping up. With the vaccines rolling out, I think we have a really good chance to have this really positive season because so many people have been away for so long. I know my workout groups have just been lighting up, like people are amped, ready to go. So it's going to be a physical season, and I think helping people recognize that, and that things like that ESPN highlight really help out people seeing like, oh, I don't know if I could do that. Like that's a tough thing to do. I think spreading that gospel, like Quidditch players actually are athletes, and continuing that conversation, I think really helps the sport grow because people learn to take it serious. Because I've seen a lot of comments on Twitter whenever we get televised. I search on Twitter for Quidditch, and there's some negative feedback there. A lot of people don't like it. The stick is a hard thing for a lot of people to see past, but just take it serious. Give it a shot.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because the way that this engagement for us actually started was a correction through our Twitter that Jim said something about, hey, this is Jim said it, and it helped get this discussion going. Jim's like, hey, can you maybe connect us with one of your wizards? And then it was very quick. The comment came back really quick. We can connect you with one of our athletes.
I mean, it was yeah. It was absolute. Yeah. And
they
from
have,
there, it's been great. I mean, it took me down this rabbit hole that I've learned so much.
Oh yeah, I mean, that first year, I tell my teammates like I didn't really take it that seriously. Like I didn't know it was going to be a thing. It was just something for me to do on Sundays, and I remember that first year. I just kind of rode the wave and was ready to go. And then I went to nationals because to me, it was just practice on Sundays. Like we didn't really do that much. I go to a couple tournaments, and then I went to nationals, and they swept the floor. Like we got wiped out. And after we lost, I just remember sitting in that huddle and our coach, Augie, you could just tell like it just emotionally impacted him because he had won the last 3 years in college playing for UT Austin. So he was used to winning championships. And then when we lost, you could just look around and see how devastated people were. And I was like, oh, this is a serious thing. And so that next season, I ended up losing like 20 pounds because I was like working out all the time with them. And we went on a string of 3 championships. So like it turned around really well for us. But I could play for a whole year before I took it seriously. So the fact that you turned around just on one tweet is that's pretty massive.
Yeah. Well, Muff, you got any other questions, buddy?
No, I think we've covered everything I had. Just for everybody out there, follow along with Major League Quidditch on their social media. Obviously, if you have any questions for us as follow up, maybe we can reconnect with Juan later. Down the road, maybe in a couple of months, just to kind of recap and see how things are going. Like, are you guys playing? Are things happening? Like, I'd be really interested here in a few months just to kind of see what type of action has started for you.
Yeah, after we win this championship.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Get back on this podcast and talk you through it.
There we go.
Perfect. So thank you again, Juan. Appreciate it. This has been very eye-opening for, I know for myself, and I think I can speak for Jim as well. So we appreciate you taking the time to do this, and we can definitely look forward to in the future maybe getting you, and if you have others that would be interested, maybe we can make this a semi-regular thing. Like every couple months we check in with somebody from Major League Quidditch.
That'd be awesome. I'm sure. I mean, Quidditch people love to talk, so I can send someone your way.
Perfect. All right, appreciate it, Juan. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.